Complex 3D models may look intimidating when you're getting started, but most models begin with simple forms. Before we can build more complex objects, we need to know how to make basic mesh objects and position them accurately in a scene. Last lesson, we learned how to move around Blender's viewport. This time we're going to begin creating objects and positioning them within the viewport. There are 5 key learning objectives that you will cover in this lesson. Adding primitive mesh objects to a Blender scene, moving objects using the Move gizmo and the shortcut, constraining movement to a single axis, switching to front orthographic and side orthographic view, and then aligning primitive objects along the x-axis. Here's an example of a couple completed objects from Asset Library that shows alignment, how you can take objects and move them and align with each other and then eventually set up a camera to render them. All right, to get started here, we are in the basic Blender interface, and what we want to do is select the cube, which we know it's going to be selected because it's got the yellow border around it, like so. Just use the mouse wheel to zoom in. And once it's selected, I can press the delete key or the X key. If I press the X key, it's going to give me the option. Do you want to delete the selected? You can say yes. If you just press delete, all it will do is delete it without any question. So there you go. Now, the first thing you want to do, and this does seem counterintuitive, is you're going to add a new cube to the mix. But I'm going to show you one of 2 ways to do this first. I'm going to go up here to add in my menu in the upper area, and I'm going to choose mesh. Okay, and I will go to the first one down that is not a 2D object. A plane is a 2D object. A cube is a 3D object. And these objects that are in here are referred to as both mesh objects and primitives. They represent the basic building blocks of 3D models. Before we start manipulating them, what we want to understand is how to move them and what they look like. So first, let's go ahead and drop a cube in there. So there is my cube. I can orbit around and see what it looks like. Now, you've got a couple different ways that you can handle moving this object. If you look to the tools here to the left-hand side, you'll see there is a move tool. When you select that, a widget appears that allows you to grab each one of these arrows and move it around as you see fit. So I'm going to press undo on those movements, put it back into the middle. The other thing I can do is press G on my keyboard. That hotkey allows me to move around. Now it's going to move around in relation to the viewport. So if I'm going to right click that so that it goes back to the other spot. If I move it around like this, it's going to move around differently than if I'm looking at it from another direction. Now, if I press G and I press X, it's going to constrain it on the X axis. And I can do that from any of the for any of the axes. If I press Z, it's going to go up and down. If I press Y, it's going to go forward and backward. I want to constrain to the X axis so that I'm only moving to the left and right. I'm going to go ahead and move this out to the side here, and I'm going to click it. Then I want you to add a new object. Now the shortcut for adding objects is if you, on your keyboard, you hold Shift and press A, that menu comes up and you can go add, and I want you to add not a circle, because a circle again is a 2D object. I want you to go to a UV sphere next. All right, and I click that, and I'm going to move that to the side same way. All right, so what I want you to do, add the remaining mesh primitives along a single row in the x-axis. Remember to use the shortcuts Shift A and G to get used to using them. Pause your video while you complete the rest of the shapes. All right, here's the scene with all my mesh primitives lined up. Now, what we want to do for the next project is treat it like it is a floor. Now, when I press numpad 1, over on the right-hand side of your keyboard is a number pad, a set of numbers that are set up different from the numbers that are at the top of your keyboard. Those act differently in Blender than your numbers on the top of the keyboard. So what you want to do is with your mouse over the workspace here, press numpad 1, and what it's going to do is it's going to go into what's called front orthographic view, and you can see that listed up here. All right, if you try to orbit at all, it's going to shift it back into perspective view. So what I'm going to do is select an object, and I know it's selected because it's got the yellow light outline around it, and I'm going to press G and move this so that it is sitting on top of that red line. And I'm going to kind of tidy up my row here a little bit as well. Now, anything below that red line is considered negative on the x-axis, or on the z-axis, which is up and down. Anything that's above it is considered positive on the z-axis, if you remember that from your geometry class. What I want you to do now is take each one of these objects and go ahead and move it so it's effectively sitting on the floor, so that all of it is in the positive z. So you have an entire row of them set up like that. We won't be covering this tutorial in class, but Andrew Price, also known as Blender Guru on YouTube, has a great tutorial series on creating a basic donut. It starts out from low poly modeling and gets into much more complex modeling, covers a lot of the basic essentials that you need to become good at creating content in Blender. It's been used by thousands of people over the years to create all sorts of scenes. There are multiple iterations of the tutorial from way back in early versions of Blender. And his work has really been instrumental in helping advance the community in Blender and making people feel successful and accomplished. If you want to get better at modeling, I suggest practicing on your own outside of class, and this tutorial series is a great way to tackle that. And then you're going to be coming in, and a lot of the stuff that we're going to be covering in class is going to be much more easy for you to complete, and your work is going to be able to focus more on creating the content you want instead of just learning the tools that I'm trying to cover.